Okay, so what happens if, you really don't like your public goods, really don't like what your city is offering you relative to your taxes? Let's say you have like high property taxes and you're not, I'm not getting anything from my property taxes. Um, or, your sales tax and property tax is how most cities do it. And so, or at the state level too, at the state level, there are local public goods at the city level, but there are also, state level public goods that, what am I getting for my taxes? So many people will say, I don't feel like I'm getting, um, what I want here. And essentially their option is to vote with their feet, is to say, I'm going to go somewhere, else. For example, if I really value good schools and I don't feel like the schools are good, I'm going to move to the area with good schools. Okay. Versus somebody who, doesn't have kids, they may say, I'm going to opt for, the area with nice restaurants or something. I don't really care about the schools. And so there is kind of, if we have lots of different municipalities, you may expect kind of the municipalities to tailor their public good provision to their residents. Some may have really nice parks, not as good school to tailor to a certain group of people. Some may have really good schools, but, not necessarily, robust parks or something like that. Okay. Now, this model is called Tibu sorting model, which is just to say, all right, sorry, there's like six assumptions, not five. Um, and so the Tibu model basically says, look, if we have lots of different communities, all right, and there's perfect information and like you can move around easily, and there's no spillovers, no scale economies, and there's a tax per person, and there's some sort of optimal size, okay, then people will sort. Okay. So we're saying like, look, if we have all these things in place, we're gonna have sorting, and we're gonna have competition for residents. And in this model where you have this level of competition, your public goods are going to approximate what would be the optimal. Okay. And the more choice, the more communities we have, we're going to get closer to what the residents' preferences are. So this is kind of the underlying conditions that will allow competition between municipalities. You need choice, you need perfect information, you need no spillovers between. So basically, I can't free ride on what the other one's doing. Scale economies, and there's no economies of scale. Taxes, like local taxes, and then there's some sort of optimal size. And so if this is true, we would expect more choice to kind of lead to better outcomes. Now, in the research, there is some evidence that this is the case. The most famous and most controversial is this Hawksby paper, Caroline Hawksby from 2001. And what she says some metropolitan areas have lots of different school districts. Others just have one. You think of LA proper just has one school district, LAUSD, right? Some areas it's like broken into many smaller districts. Okay. And she's basically saying this is a form of Tibu sorting where you could have more school districts, more competition. This would lead to better outcomes. All right. And she essentially finds that this more competition does lead to better outcomes, raises productivity. The school level productivity seems to be higher. All right. And this is more true when more school districts have financial independence. And she says that people are less likely to opt for the private option. They're more likely, where they can basically choose the school district, they're more likely to stay in the public system. This paper is very controversial because essentially it's arguing basically for more school choice. Okay. Now, the difficulty of the Tibu model is the assumptions almost never hold because oftentimes there are spillovers between municipalities. If there's a nice public park in one, it's not like I can't go to it. I can easily free ride and go to that park. With transportation networks, there are economies of scale. So in the real world, the issue with the Tibu is oftentimes there are spillovers and oftentimes there are economies of scale. And there's not necessarily perfect information. And one of the research projects I was a part of was providing school quality information to low income households. Because oftentimes people don't know how good are the schools. It's a little difficult. It's easier now, but in the past it was difficult to figure out, have really good information on how good the schools are. So, oftentimes these three ones kind of break down a little bit. Scale economies is really only in transportation where you have economies of scale. Spillovers is not not and that one is a little more realistic, really only exists in public parks. Perfect information. So in general, the information is pretty good, not perfect. So they aren't like crazy assumptions, but in general, they break down a little bit in the real world. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. Here's an economies of scale. Obviously, economies of scale and transportation, it's just the transportation. If each kind of city has their own transportation network, it's not as good as connect a whole big connected transportation network that allows you to get from, say, over here to over here. Okay, we'll finish up with home prices in a second.